Greetings, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. Here I am in Bushy Park, London. So this park is over 1,000 acres. So it's a royal park, and it's the second biggest royal park in London. So in the southwest edge of London, there's also the town of Bushy in Hertfordshire, and people sometimes mix them up. So Bushy Park doesn't have an E in it, whereas Bushy, the town, is EY on the end, and that's miles from here. That's like 25 miles north of here. So I know someone who was trying to book a place to say, well, Bushy Park, and imagine that was in the village of Bushy. Totally not the case. Well, there are quite a few bushes around. I'm guessing that's how it got its name. Anyway, there are Neolithic remains here, so people have been here for a very long time. But it's been a royal park since the Middle Ages. They used to like to hunt deer here, and I wonder if these are the descendants of some of the beasts that were hunted by royalty in bygone centuries. So it's closed to the public for centuries. King Charles I had a special canal dug. It's 12 miles long, called the Longford River. I don't know if it's because it's a long ford. It is quite long and it's quite shallow, possible to wade through. I don't think it's named in honour of the Irish county, or indeed Longford town. And that comes from Feltham to here. I suppose it's connected to the Thames to provide water for the royal park. So we're abutting the boroughs of Kingston upon Thames. There's Hampton Court close by, Teddington and so on. And so there are railway stations all around it. So it's been popular with Londoners for over a century. People coming here in the autumn to see the chestnuts blossoming. And there's several sports clubs based here, like Teddington Rugger Club, Teddington Hockey Club. There's a cricket club and so on. Obviously people can cycle through. There is a road where people are allowed to drive. Obviously you're not allowed to drive on this, which is a good thing. Now certain sections of the park are fenced off. I'm not quite sure why. Some people's houses are actually in the park. They actually have to come in to get to their house. You'll see an example over there. Hampton Court Palace is just over the wall of the park. We're not that close to it here. And of course, Cardinal Wolsey had that built for himself. So he was Archbishop of York in the early 16th century. And the Pope can make someone a cardinal. He can make an Archbishop cardinal or a Bishop cardinal, or actually can make anybody cardinal. You can be Cardinalum in pectore, as in the chest, a secret cardinal. And this might be so secret even the man himself doesn't know that he's been appointed a cardinal. It's a hinge in Latin. And of course, when the Pope dies, all the cardinals are summoned to Rome and they elect a new Pope, invariably one of their number, though that's not actually a rule that they do so. We've only had cardinals about 1,000 years. So you see, that's a bit of the Longford River, and then it goes underground. Not all archbishops are cardinals. Some are, some aren't. It just depends whether the Pope thinks that individual is worthy of the red hat, which cardinals used to wear. They don't actually wear it anymore. It's hung above their coffin after they die. Like a symbol of Christ Church, Oxford, that college that was founded in Oxford University by Cardinal Wolsey. That's why their drinking society is called Cardinals, or carved into the stonework there you see a cardinal's hat. Anyway, so Wolsey, he was Archbishop of York and a few other places, but he only went to York once during his archiepiscopate, and he was also the King's Lord Chancellor. So Lord Chancellor, was in charge of the writing department, because of course monarch receives a huge amount of correspondence from foreign monarchs, and there are also like tax records, court records, there was a court case, a dispute, who won, what was the judgment, who owns which property, and therefore assessing tax liability, as well as criminal trials, what the verdict was, what the sentence was, if any, and so forth. Now obviously that was far more than one person could handle, so then the chancery became a department full of clerks, and he was ultimately in charge of that. That's why there's even a font called Chancery, of the Chancery buildings such as in Berlin. And that's why their equivalent of Prime Minister is Chancellor, as in Chancellor to this day. So this is an office which goes back to Anglo-Saxon times, has existed for well over 1,000 years, is the oldest political office in England, but the Lord Chancellor's got a role for the whole of the United Kingdom now. So if I'd served my God as well as my King, he would not have given me grey hairs, as Thomas Cardinal Wolsey said towards the end of his life. And of course, when one is installed as a cardinal, then Cardinal actually becomes part of the name. It's not just a title. You can call him Cardinal Wolsey or Thomas Cardinal Wolsey, either way, not Cardinal Thomas. Anyway, so he fell out with the king. He fell foul of Great Harry's wrath over the king's great matter, not managing to secure an annulment from the Bishop of Rome, Henry VIII, being dissatisfied with his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, who didn't produce a surviving son. These male heirs always managed to die within a few days, although he had a surviving daughter, Mary Tudor. Don't want to tell the whole story of it now. But anyway, Cardinal Wolsey had amassed a vast fortune whilst Archbishop of York, and he could draw the full salary for various clerical positions he held, pay someone else to actually discharge the duties, pay them a fraction of them. So what on earth did all these ecclesiastical positions exist for? Was this not simony? I'm not sure if he actually bought the offices, but he was surely embezzling funds so he could live in absolute opulence, had a mistress and 2 children with her. So there he was violating his oath of chastity. They asked his mistress, how is it that you had children with a prince of the church, an archbishop who was sworn never to have intimate relations with a female? And she said, well, he asked me to kiss his ring, and then one thing led to another. I just made that up. So obviously we're not allowed to have intimate relations with a male either. Anyway, so he had that huge palace for himself, built down by the Thames, Hampton Court Palace, well outside London. Then would be considered almost 20 miles from London. Obviously now is considered in London. But he fell from grace, and he was arrested in northern England and brought down to London to stand trial, possibly for his life, but he fell ill and died en route. So Henry VIII sequestered his property. I suppose it was ecclesiastical property, so it was already clashing with the Catholic Church, although Henry VIII didn't actually break with Rome until 1533. It's debatable when he broke. It's a process, it's not an event. Various things where he's refusing to pay dues to the Catholic Church, or saying that there can be no appeals to the Catholic Church abroad. You can't send things to Rome to be settled. They will decide about the Catholic Church in England, which he felt he could strong arm. Anyway, so that was the end of Cardinal Wolsey, and then the British royal family has owned Hampton Court Palace ever since, and he spent quite some time there. You can go there and be led around by some guides wearing 16th century costume, and indeed Tony Robinson, in his series The Worst Jobs in History, showed us what it was like to be a spit boy or whatever, turning the spit in the gardens, not the gardens, in the kitchens of this royal palace. So they would have no doubt partaken of the flesh of these deer we saw here. Now, it's dangerous at certain times of year. Don't approach them when they're in rutting season. This time of year is not rutting season, so it's fairly safe. Now, William IV is the other king most closely associated with this place. So he lived in Bushy House, and he was Ranger of Bushy Park. That was one of his positions before he became king. As well as being a prince, he had the title Duke of Clarence. One person can have several titles. And he had no affection or indeed desire for his good wife whatsoever. He took up with his mistress, Dorothea Jordan, an Irish actress who'd assumed the title Mrs. for herself to explain an unwed pregnancy. But anyway, he had 10 children with her, but none with his spouse. So they lived here in considerable comfort, lived a life of the most blameless bourgeois domesticity. The Duke of Clarence and his children, given the surname Fitz-Clarence, that being Norman French for being illegitimate son of or daughter of. When I say that, it obviously read to fils, the French word, as in son. I don't mean to say that in any kind of disparaging manner, illegitimate, but what else can I say? Born outside of holy matrimony. It doesn't bother me two hoots if someone's born in marriage or not, but back then, if you were conceived the wrong side of the blanket, then you'd be bullied and insulted all the time. But they remain fairly prominent in national life well into the 19th century. His descendants, some of them were high-ranking army officers and so forth, but because they were born outside of marriage, they had no right to inherit the throne. So he ruled on for a few years, the Sailor King, or Sailor Billy as he's known, but he made sure his wife was made Ranger of Bushy Park after him, so that when she died she could live here. He actually fell out of love with his mistress as well, Dorothea Jordan, so she died in relatively straitened circumstances. So perhaps not the best example of family life. Bear in mind that he was also head and supreme governor of the Church of England, and I suppose of the Church of Ireland, and indeed the Church of Scotland. There's no Church of Wales, so it's called the Church of England, even in Wales. And so people said that's not really setting an example of right living. This is far from exemplary conduct, committing adultery. Other people are severely punished or castigated by the Church for the most trifling misdemeanors. Yet you can commit adultery every day for years, and no clergyman ever dares breathe a word against you. Or breed a word, you can see where that Freudian slip came in. Anyhow, so that was the end of him. But after his wife died, Bushy House fell into a state of some disrepair. I'm not sure if it's still standing even. All right, so that's probably enough about Bushy Park. Well worth visiting. The National Physics Laboratory is just over the fence that away. And indeed, what else am I going to point out about it? Oh yeah, Alan Turing used to live around here when he was working there, the code breaker of Bletchley Park. He was half Irish, hurrah, and I think half English. But he'd been to Sherborne School, one of the only famous people to gone there apart from, say, Hugh Bonneville, the actor. And then was at Cambridge University, and he was a real Asperger's sort of person, but a maths geek. That's why he wrote that book, what's it called, On Computable Numbers. And then, yeah, was there at the British Code-Breaking Centre managing to decipher the Third Reich's secret military code and helping advance the cause of Allied victory in the First World War. But he was of the homosexualist bent. So he was arrested after the Second World War in the 1950s when a young man stole something from his house, and he reported the crime to the police, and the police said, "How is it this young man came to be in your house?" And he said, "Well, I met him," and he acknowledged that he had invited this man into his house for a homosexual encounter, which of course was a crime to 1967, and the police said they were going to prefer charges against him. So he bit into an apple that he'd injected with cyanide, and that was the end of him. Of course, he's been posthumously pardoned. Well, did he have a conviction for that? I think he was convicted for that, yeah. Now, the punishment by the 1950s was not that severe. Would have been a heavy fine, might have been a few weeks in prison, but nevertheless it was disgraced. Some people wouldn't want to know him. A lot of jobs he'd be barred from would have been perceived as a security risk because he was susceptible to blackmail for that reason. Anyway, that's enough about Bushy Park. Do come and visit it. I like it, the sort of wilderness. I like the way it's not manicured lawns and flower beds. They've left it grow in its natural state. I'll switch it off now.